Folks, thanks for joining us again today and joining the growing number of people in Canada and the US and even some around the world who are tuning into Stockwell Day-to-Day News. We try and give you what's behind the scenes on some of the main headlines. We try and save you time from having to be overwhelmed by scanning all kinds of different networks to pick out some things that you might feel are important. So today, stay tuned. Right now, we're going to talk about a huge projects announcement that was done by the Canadian government, and already it's coming into serious question. We're looking at what it means to buy Canada, and a bit of a requiem, an RIP for the ostrich farm and those beautiful birds that were all recently slaughtered by Canadian officials, unfortunately. We're going to talk about involution. You've heard of revolution. This is involution in China. Is the economy really collapsing? And how about the Canadian intelligence services and talking about Russia and China spying on Canada from the north? So let's jump right into it. The Prime Minister of Canada has made a series of dramatic announcements, supposedly dramatic, related to huge projects. He says Canada's going to start building again. And this has gotten quite a bit of attention. Now, just to zero in on some specifics of why it's already running into serious problems. For instance, big announcement related to a liquefaction plant that's for LNG, liquid natural gas, which can be exported to nations around the world, and something that I and others have been advocating for some time. This particular plant is owned by and with and on the Ks'lismis First Nations group in northern BC, announced with great fanfare, and already several others, not just one or two, several other First Nations groups are saying, no way, this is not going to go ahead. We're opposing our own First Nations group on this. That means if past history is any kind of a precedent, this could go on for years, try and get approvals. And it's actually part of the owners, the principal owners of that project are actually out of Texas, and they have already said, no, we're moving this liquefaction plant to Korea, where there seems to be more common sense applied to the regulations and things getting done in a timely way. So this is just an example of all these projects that are being announced by the Prime Minister. They're going to run into serious problems because the Liberal government is really doing very little to clear away the brush and to clear away all the undertow, if you want to call it that, of regulations that are mystifying to everybody, and complications relative to First Nations. You know, there are First Nations groups who want to move ahead, who want to see great things happening within their community. They're being opposed by other First Nations groups. So when the Prime Minister was asked about all of these problems, his response simply was, well, announcing is not the same as approving. So already that is stalling, and that's going to have some serious effects on the economy and on the expected investment that we were hoping to have come in. Along that, we still keep hearing about the fact that the Prime Minister is saying, and with all of these projects, these are huge mega projects, any of them, they have to buy Canada. That means whether it's technology, massive infrastructure, could even mean engineers and scientists, you're only allowed to shop for these projects to put them in motion from Canada. Well, the whole purpose of free trade is to allow people, citizens, to have the enjoyment and the ability of being able to shop at home or abroad and to be picking the items that we think are the highest quality, the best price. It is always this free opportunity to choose our markets, always leads to the best products, always leads to the best type of employment, always leads to lower costs. And when you say, or when you isolate, as China does, your country to only buying Chinese products, if you do the same in Canada, you're asking for huge problems. We're going to look at that in a couple of minutes. So along with the approval processes of these projects, this whole aspect on having to buy Canada is taking other investors and other owners who previously liked Canada, taking them out of Canada. This is going to hurt. It's going to hurt badly. On the Buy Canada notion, because it gets talked about so much and it's looked at without any kind of a critical eye from mainstream media. First of all, people are saying, well, why wouldn't the media be more analytical on this thing about Buy Canada? Well, it's because they want to see restrictions on anybody even shopping for media outside the country. And of course, mainstream media companies like the CBC rely on government subsidies. So Canadian mainstream media is largely a cheerleading section for the Liberal government and whatever the Liberal government wants to do. And that actually has an effect on people. If your only consumption sites are mainstream media, so-called mainstream media, you're going to be affected, and Canadians are being affected. They're saying now, a poll was recently done saying, if you can believe this, 85% of Canadians are saying even as Christmas approaches, they're going to be buying Canada. Look, that's great, and I love Canada. I'll always support Canada, but you know what? There's some particular coffee that I like to source out of Africa, and it can be bought on shelves in Canada on grocery stores, and excellent coffee product. I'm going to keep buying that, over Christmas for myself and for others. There are some excellent other products, some like coffee, and some clothing and textile products that I find are very favorable to my style, I guess, and staying warm in the winter. And these come from South America and come from largely small factories, small communities in South America where they're struggling to survive, but they're producing extra products and extra quality products that you can't get in Canada. I'm still going to be buying from there and maybe ordering some gifts from there for my family. There's some technology products, some of which I will buy in Canada, but most tech products are made outside of Canada. There's a couple in Sweden, some tech products that I'm going to be using on my broadcast. So folks, we have to be careful. This notion when the federal Liberal government, all they want to do is, or much of what they want to do is just to stand up and shake a fist at the US. And in this whole process of only buying Canada, we don't allow for proper competition to happen. We don't allow for the best products to emerge. We don't wind up supporting employment in third world countries. It's an entirely negative thing. It's what we call cutting off our noses to spite our face. And we need to give this some second serious thought. We need to see the Canadian government lowering our taxes, lowering investment costs, lowering small business costs, so that small business owners and medium-sized business owners in Canada can be producing the goods and services that we like and at a cost we can't afford. It's the federal government policies and many provincial government policies that are driving costs up and forcing us to take this nonsensical route of cutting off the sources of all other products and services from around the world. I want to pause, I'm not going to say a moment of silence, but just for a moment of consideration, because we saw the official burying of 314 beautiful ostriches. This saga has gone on for a long time in Canada, as our viewers and our listeners know, and resulted in the Canadian agencies, including the RCMP, unfortunately, going into this farm in British Columbia and slaughtering 314 what appear to be very healthy and beautiful ostriches. Now, remembering the genesis of this problem, it started some time ago when it was identified that there was bird flu or avian flu with some of the birds in this very large, we'll call it a flock, but it was huge, over 400 birds. And so the birds were all tested. 69 of them were deemed to have this particular virus, this flu virus, and so they were killed. And as they were watching, as health officials were watching, the flu did not spread to the rest of the ostrich community. Over 300 birds stayed alive. They were not infected. They did not get the virus. They did not need to be vaccinated. And here is really what people are saying is the crux of the problem, that if you have it publicly accepted that a large group of animals, including humans, could be first attacked by a virus, and then most of the community recovering or building up immunity to the virus, that would mean they don't need the vaccine. If you don't need the vaccine, that has an impact on pharmaceutical companies that want to sell millions and millions, if not billions, of doses of various vaccines. This is not an anti-vaccine commentary. I am not anti-vax. I am saying, though, if people are healthy, they should not be taking on the risk that comes with taking vaccines. All vaccines have some risks. And as individuals and as humans, we weigh those out. We say, well, is it worth the risk for me to take that? And this notion of this large ostrich herd surviving to the surprise of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency was something that was shocking. They said, no, we've got to kill them all anyway. We don't even care if they're healthy. And as you recall, a number of appeals were made. Some very large testing facilities in Canada and outside of Canada offered to come in free of charge and test the rest of the birds that seemed to be healthy. And the Canadian government said, no, we don't care if they're healthy, we don't want that. There was a very large research organization out of the US that made a formal bid to actually take all of the birds right out of Canada, cost-free, disease-free, disease risk-free, and they wanted to put them in a large testing and research facility area in the US to do further research on why these birds survive. No, the federal Liberals, the Prime Minister said, no, slaughter all the birds, kill the birds. And so it gives the ability for conspiracy people who think that all of this is, sort of motivated by greedy pharmaceutical companies. It just underlines the strength of that message. And so we pause today, not just for the birds. I don't get overly worked up in terms of the spiritual eternity and eternal resting place of birds, but it's a sad, sad case. 314 beautiful ostriches buried without being tested, and the government refusing to test them. I don't know if we're going to learn a lesson from this. I just hope we do. Looking at China, you're going to be hearing a new term. It's called involution. It's not a revolution, it's involution. China's economy is under some severe downward pressure, some even pointing to maybe collapsing. And it's done because it's proof that this has happened because socialism does not work. It can appear to have a short-term boost as a government injects monies into certain types of government-picked agencies and a few government-picked companies, and then you get governments taking taxpayer dollars and infusing these companies with billions of dollars, which allows these companies some short-term energy boosts, some short-term production boosts, but it's all based on false economy. The effect of the marketplace, the effect of competing ideas to lead to better products is removed, and you have collapse. The home market, the housing market in China is completely collapsing. Two reasons there. Again, because of overregulation, the costs are huge, and so government has to infuse and try and subsidize companies to build houses that could have been built if it hadn't been for the insane amount of over-bureaucratization. Same type of things as we see happen in Canada, by the way, in the housing market. So their housing market is on the verge of collapse, along with their policy, which was in place for years, the one-child policy, which has been relaxed in a number of areas in China as they realized that type of a one-child policy where you don't replace yourself as human beings, it actually winds up, your country dies, quite literally. That's what's happening not just in Canada, it's happening, or not just in China, it's happening in Japan in a significant way. They've got real problems with that. And companies or countries like Canada and others, the only way they counter that or balance that out is by huge immigration influx and hoping that the immigrants who are coming in will keep having babies to keep your economy going. So China in severe housing policy problems there. And not just there, but the EV, the electric vehicle mandate, where, as you recall, not just in China, but around the world, because of forced declarations out of the UN, we were going to have electric vehicles that was going to solve all the problems of energy and emissions around the world. It has proven out increasingly not to have worked. Certainly, there are some positive about electric vehicles in some cases. A country like Canada, they really don't make a lot of sense where you have so much cold weather and it's such a draw on the batteries. All of this to say that the infatuation and the excitement globally that was going around electric vehicle mandates, where governments were forcing people to buy them by bringing in restrictions and saying, we're going to restrict the number of natural gas, we're going to strip the number of gasoline cars and vehicles. It just hasn't been working. And as more and more people realize that actually the environment and the world is not collapsing, as more and more scientific studies are coming out saying we're actually certainly climate changes, and certainly we should always be looking to see how we can keep a clean environment. But the end of the world, as predicted, is simply not happening, is not going to happen. And so you're getting a drop off on these electric vehicle mandates. That's had a huge impact in China because they've invested billions, untold billions of dollars on the fact that they thought that the United Nations proclamation on electric vehicle mandates and spreading out to different candidates or different countries was going to result in huge uptick in EVs. It's not happening. These are not happening. It's in serious trouble. Again, a reflection and a pause, a learning, a tuition moment here for Canada to be looking at and backing off of these very expensive electric vehicle mandates, billion-dollar subsidies to products now that people increasingly do not want. In China, the other thing they're doing to try and keep their productions going, they're forcing people to renew their various products and forcing them to buy new. For instance, if a refrigerator is X number of years old, they're going to deem that as too old, even if it's working well, and force you to buy a new one to allow factories to keep making, for instance, refrigerators or ovens or large items or vehicles. If your vehicle is getting too old, they're going to force you to junk your vehicle and buy a new one. This is what happens when you have increased socialist policies being mandated from within your government. It's happening increasingly in Canada. It's really bewildering to see in the United States, one city after another now, voting in socialist mayors. This is by a population largely of the 18 to 34-year-olds are largely convinced that socialism is a wonderful thing. And the reason they're convinced of that is because for the last 75 years or so in our universities, the prevailing theme, especially on economic policy, is what we call cultural Marxism, and that means government being the sole decider of which businesses and industries should go ahead, government funding with massive subsidies a few of their choice friends and companies. It's called corporate statism or corporate socialism. Folks, it doesn't work. It's killing China. It's hurting Canada, these policies. We need to open up our eyes and take a serious look. And you know what? I keep, hope springs eternal, I keep hoping that mainstream media would report on the downside of these socialist policies, whether they're happening in New York City or whether they're happening in China. They need to do that. But of course, mainstream media, CBC and others, BBC in the UK will not do that because they get funded from the government. They are the government's propaganda mouthpiece. Very sad to see that. In Canada, our intelligence services, Dan Rogers, who's head of the intelligence service, has come out just now with some very concerning reports about Chinese and Russian spy activity on the uptick in Canada, especially in the Arctic. Now, here this is, it's never a good time to hear that. And as I can tell you, as Canada's former Minister of Public Safety and responsible for CSIS, for our intelligence services, I can tell you these are serious people and they're reporting a real problem. And this does not help our trade situation, let alone the security situation, but with the U.S. The U.S. is very concerned about their own security. We've always been a good partner with the U.S. in terms of even going back as far as the 50s when we helped to establish the so-called DO line, which was a series of networks of radar stations going all across the Arctic to make it prohibitive for Russia or China at the time to think about coming over the Arctic Circle with aircraft. They would be spotted beforehand and potentially shot down. So when we are sending the signal to the U.S. that we don't want to get into discussions with them about even things like a dome of protection, the same type of electronic dome that has satellite dome that has protected Israel from annihilation, and we simply snubbing our nose to the Americans once again, saying, we don't care that you're worried about security. This does not help our trade situation, folks. It makes it even worse as the U.S. administration then more and more decides to push back against Canada. Right now, we have the unenviable position in Canada of being the nation that is pushing back harder and more publicly attacking and insulting the United States than any other nation in the world. And I guess I could say, how's that working for you? It would be great to see some change in policy on that, of course, defending Canadian sovereignty, but putting on our grown-up pants and sitting down and having the tough negotiations with the U.S. that are required instead of the ridiculous, highly public attacking and insults and then saying we're going to draw closer to China. That'll be the answer. Great, we're going to draw closer to a Chinese economy which appears to be cratering. On the arts and entertainment side, as you know, Netflix shares have been dropping because of their seriously, call it woke or diversity agenda, inclusion agenda. They're continuing to push the woke agenda relative to transgender issues, and more people, actually by the hundreds of thousands, are leaving Netflix, as I did just recently. And so the pressure of that, then of course an organization, a company has to look for other ways to bring in revenue. So guess what? They've just announced one of the ways in which they're going to increase revenue is by getting people to watch Netflix more. Okay, that's interesting. And since they know that people are not wanting to watch the increased number of really garbage woke productions that they're doing, they're bringing on certain gaming events and increasing the number of viewers. Now, spending hours per day in your basement or anywhere in your house on gaming, to me, has always been kind of a strange proposition. I don't want my brain rot to get any worse than it already is. I don't want my thinking capacities to be eroded so that I'm spending all the time on gaming. But now what they're doing is promoting the gaming so that people can watch the gamers. I don't know, there's a lot of boring things going on in the world. Not too much more boring than watching gamers game. It's one thing being a gamer. That's questionable enough. But now people are going to be paying to watch gamers game. Folks, I think we're kind of losing grip here, but that's the Netflix approach. Let's see where it goes. In Hollywood, because of the ongoing panic that people are demanding less and less of the woke, diverse product lines that are coming out of Hollywood, and as more and more alternatives are coming online, and as AI is creating the ability to have pretty amazing films, Hollywood is panicking and they're saying, where can we get investors? And guess what? They're finding that a number of Hollywood productions going to Dubai. Now, I've been to Dubai. It's an incredible place. You talk about technology. You talk about a lot of technological advancements. That's an amazing place to be. It is an Islamic nation. And so it's in an Islamic nation. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Islamist government likes the Hollywood diversity and DEI program. In most Islamist countries, they still kill gays. Many of in the countries where they don't actually kill them, they force you to leave, or they make your orientation illegal. So going to be very interesting to see how Hollywood's, they always stand up and wave the diversity flag. Let's see how bravely they are waving the diversity and inclusiveness flag once they're dealing with the Islamic states and regions like Dubai. Keep an eye on that. Amazing court ruling that's come out. It's not really a court ruling. There's a resolution panel in British Columbia, Canada. And of course, they are there to govern all things that we watch and see and protect us from all types of evil. So some time ago, there was an image posted on X, on the X platform. Now, we can't find out what the image was, but it was, they say, a woman who was exposed in an intimate situation. Now, I am all for protection of that type of thing, even if you don't agree with a particular type of activity. I agree with privacy protection. But in this case, the British Columbia Resolution Tribunal told X, which of course is an international company, to take down that image. And that is their right to do that or to suggest that. But not only that, the BC Tribunal has said, and X has to take down that image all around the world, in every other country where it's available. And I want you to think about that for a minute. You could have a severely extremist left-wing government a government that has all kinds of horrific policies like China. Think about this. If X has to give in to this court ruling from BC to take down a particular item, not just in Canada, not just in the offending state, but all over the world, then you could have strange, bizarre, and very human right restrictive nations saying to X, I want you to take down this offensive post, whatever it might be, and not just in our communist regime, but all over the world. And so you're going to get the possibility, if X caves into this, of the worst regimes in the world deciding what items can stay on your particular site or not. Case in point, as you know, and as we've been talking about yesterday, Apple as a company has caved into China and is taking down its very popular dating sites that are gay dating sites that are available on Apple. China says, no, we don't like that, take them down. So they have. Now, I'm not going to make a comment relative to Apple. They're a business, they're a company that has to make decisions, they have to make profit. But here would be a situation where, just think about it, if China was taking the same approach on taking down a certain item as BC is taking, saying to X, you've got to take down this item all over the world, then China could be saying, take down that item on gay dating sites, not just in China, but all over the world. Shut it down all over the world. Folks, we need to think about the far-reaching effects of some of these policies. Think about that today as we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thanks for joining in. Bye now.